She had always known that talent alone would not be enough to get her where she wanted to go. Every step of her journey had been paved with effort, sleepless nights, and a determination that sometimes felt heavier than she could carry. When she finally received the offer for the prestigious position, a mixture of relief and pride flooded through her. It was not just another job. It was the culmination of years of dedication, the validation of countless hours spent learning, practicing, and proving to herself that she was capable. The office itself was intimidating, even on the first day. High ceilings, polished floors, a constant hum of activity made it clear that this was a place where expectations were high and mistakes were costly. As she walked through the hallways, she could feel eyes on her, some curious, some skeptical. She smiled politely at colleagues, trying to blend in while carrying the quiet weight of ambition and hope. She knew that starting strong was important, but she also knew that in some corners, her presence would be questioned not for her skill, but for who she was. From the very first meeting, the undertone of doubt was palpable. A few colleagues whispered comments that reached her ears, subtle enough to be brushed off in polite conversation, but sharp enough to sting. One senior coworker in particular made his skepticism obvious. He often interrupted her, questioned her reasoning, and dismissed her suggestions with a tone that made it seem as if he believed she did not truly deserve the position. He had not even taken the time to know her work. He assumed, based on nothing but his own biases, that she was there because of an external agenda, rather than her own merit. She felt the tension settle over her like a heavy fog. It was difficult to ignore the constant judgment, especially when it was mixed with polite smiles and handshakes. She caught herself imagining moments when things could go wrong and worried about the embarrassment of proving herself wrong in the eyes of those who already doubted her. But she reminded herself that she had faced challenges before. Every obstacle she had overcome had taught her resilience. This was no different. Every day she arrived early, prepared her work meticulously, and double-checked every detail. She wanted to ensure that no one could question her dedication or competence. She spoke carefully in meetings, choosing words that were confident yet not confrontational. And she listened with patience to others' ideas, even when her own instincts told her they were off track. It was exhausting, balancing the need to be assertive with the need to avoid giving skeptics any excuse to dismiss her. Despite the challenges, there were small victories that kept her going. A colleague who had initially seemed indifferent praised her quietly for a report she had submitted, noting that her analysis had clarified points that others had overlooked. Another team member, hesitant at first, began seeking her input on difficult problems. These small acknowledgments reminded her that, while some doubted her for reasons beyond her control, others were beginning to see her for who she truly was. The senior coworker, however, did not relent. He would make subtle remarks during meetings, sometimes questioning her approach or comparing it unfavorably to someone else's past work. She noticed the way he would glance at her as if waiting for her to falter. It was clear he expected her to make mistakes, and he seemed to take satisfaction in imagining the confirmation of his assumptions. She had to fight the urge to respond in kind, to let him know that his judgment was not only unfair, but uninformed. There were moments when she doubted herself. Late at night, after everyone had left the office, she would review her work, questioning whether she had missed something, whether she had overlooked a critical detail. The whispers of doubt that she carried in her mind often matched the ones she heard from others, and at times it was hard to separate reality from fear. But in those quiet moments, she also remembered her accomplishments. The long hours of study, the difficult choices, and the obstacles she had overcome. She reminded herself that her journey had never been easy. This was simply another test of her resilience. She also found ways to cope with the tension, without letting it dominate her life. During lunch breaks, she would step outside, feeling the cold air on her face, and let herself breathe. She would remind herself of her goals and the reasons she had chosen this path. Talking to friends outside the office who believed in her provided a sense of balance. A reminder that the doubts of one or two individuals could not define her worth, even as she focused on her work. She could not ignore the subtle ways the office culture tested her. Invitations to informal gatherings were often passed over. Comments were laced with assumptions. and achievements were sometimes attributed to luck or circumstance rather than effort and skill. She realized that she could either be consumed by the unfairness of it or let her work speak for itself. She chose the latter. Understanding that credibility is built over time and that results are more persuasive than words, her determination began to catch the attention of others, not through self-promotion but through consistency and competence. Tasks that seemed daunting to others were handled with precision, and problems that lingered for weeks found solutions through her careful analysis and innovative thinking. Slowly, she started to build a reputation, not just among peers, but also among some of the leadership who valued results above perception. Throughout this period, she maintained a careful balance of humility and confidence. She did not need to shout about her accomplishments, nor did she allow skepticism to diminish her self-belief. Each day was a test, not only of skill, but of patience and character. She learned to navigate the politics of the office with grace, understanding that respect is earned, not through confrontation, but through consistency and integrity. She also discovered allies in unexpected places. Some colleagues, initially distant, began to approach her for advice or collaboration. They recognized her expertise and appreciated her willingness to listen and contribute thoughtfully. These alliances, though quiet, were a source of encouragement, a reminder that while some doubted her, there were those who valued her contributions and recognized her abilities. The senior coworker, meanwhile, continued his silent campaign of doubt. Yet with each passing week, his criticisms grew less effective. Her work continued to shine through, undeniable in its quality and impact. He could attempt to undermine her verbally, but the results were tangible, measurable, and increasingly impressive. She began to sense a shift, subtle at first, but growing in strength, a realization that competence could not be dismissed indefinitely. By the end of her first few months, she had navigated complex projects, handled difficult interactions, and proven that her position was deserved. The doubts of the skeptical coworker and others lingered, but they no longer held the power to shake her confidence. She had established herself quietly, through effort, resilience, and unwavering focus, setting the stage for the next challenge that would truly test the depth of her abilities and the strength of her resolve. She never expected the next challenge to come so soon. Yet when it did, it felt like a test she could not refuse. A project of significant importance landed on her desk, one that had been avoided by many before her because of its complexity and high visibility. It was the kind of work where mistakes were not just noticed, they were magnified. Some of her colleagues whispered behind her back, implying that perhaps she was in over her head, reinforcing the doubts of the skeptical coworker who still refused to believe in her abilities. She spent hours reviewing every detail of the project, analyzing past attempts, and identifying potential pitfalls. She mapped out strategies and anticipated questions that could arise from higher management. Every choice she made, every decision she considered, was backed by careful thought and experience. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it fueled her determination rather than diminishing it. In her first team meeting about the project, she presented her approach confidently, yet patiently. She anticipated pushback, and it came almost immediately. The senior coworker raised questions designed to shake her confidence, pointing out supposed weaknesses or flaws that she had already considered and addressed. She listened without reacting, calmly explaining her reasoning and offering evidence and alternatives. Her composure drew the attention of other team members, some of whom had previously doubted her. As the days passed, she found herself juggling multiple aspects of the project simultaneously. She coordinated with teams who were skeptical of her leadership, often having to prove her competence more than necessary. At the same time, she faced tight deadlines, demanding specifications, and unexpected obstacles that required quick thinking and adaptability. Every moment tested not only her skills but her patience and resilience. Despite the constant pressure, small victories began to appear. Problems that had stumped the team for weeks were solved with her innovative solutions. She received quiet acknowledgments from colleagues who were impressed by her clarity of thought and attention to detail. These small moments were like drops of encouragement, reminding her that persistence and careful planning could overcome even the harshest skepticism. The senior coworker, however, remained a constant source of tension. He questioned every decision, often in meetings where others could hear. Attempting to embarrass her or undermine her authority, she learned to handle it with calm professionalism, knowing that any emotional reaction could be twisted into an excuse to dismiss her abilities. She focused on the project, letting results speak louder than words. As the project progressed, she began to notice subtle shifts in the team dynamic. Some colleagues who had been indifferent or doubtful started seeking her advice on complicated problems. They realized that her approach was methodical, thoughtful, and effective. Her influence grew quietly, based not on titles or personal charm, but on competence and consistent results. The respect she earned was earned in the quiet moments of problem-solving and collaboration. Through confrontation, late nights became a regular part of her routine. She reviewed reports, refined strategies, and prepared presentations that anticipated every potential question or objection. Exhaustion was constant, but so was her focus. She reminded herself that she was not just completing a project. She was proving in every detail. Her skills and judgment were genuine and valuable. The turning point came when the project required a presentation to the executives. She knew this was the moment where everything would be scrutinized. She prepared meticulously, rehearsing every point, visualizing potential questions, and planning how to respond with confidence. The preparation was exhaustive, but she welcomed it, knowing that careful work would leave no room for doubt. When the presentation day arrived, she walked into the room with quiet confidence. The executives were engaged, attentive, and occasionally challenging in their questions. She responded with clarity and precision, using examples, data, and reasoning to support every recommendation. Her voice did not waver, and her presence commanded attention without arrogance. The room, once filled with subtle skepticism, grew quiet in the face of her competence. The senior coworker, who had previously doubted her at every turn, watched in stunned silence. For the first time, it seemed that the weight of her abilities could not be ignored. His comments, his doubts, and his assumptions had no power against the clarity of her work and the strength of her preparation. She noticed his expressions shift subtly, a mixture of surprise, begrudging respect, and realization that her achievements were no accident. After the presentation, the executives praised her work. They acknowledged not only the quality of the project, but also her leadership, planning, and problem-solving skills. Their approval was tangible, and the quiet acknowledgement from other team members reinforced the fact that her abilities had been recognized. Even the colleagues who had been indifferent were now observing her with a new perspective. Seeing her contributions clearly and appreciating the results she had delivered, the senior coworker approached her privately, his words careful and measured. He admitted, without directly apologizing, that he had underestimated her. He asked questions about her approach, seeking insight that only she could provide. She responded graciously, sharing knowledge without resentment, understanding that the moment was not about proving him wrong, but about demonstrating professionalism and integrity. This experience became a turning point for her. She realized that true recognition does not come from convincing skeptics, but from consistent excellence and patience. The work she had done, the hours she had invested, and the careful strategies she employed spoke louder than any words could. The project had tested her abilities in every possible way, and she had risen to the challenge without compromising her values or composure. Through this journey, she also learned the importance of quiet leadership. Influence is not always about being loud or assertive. It is about showing competence, listening to others, and making decisions that stand up to scrutiny. Her example began to inspire colleagues who were navigating their own doubts and challenges, creating a ripple effect of respect and collaboration by the end of the project. The initial skepticism that had greeted her arrival seemed almost irrelevant. While some doubts remained, they were overshadowed by tangible results, visible leadership, and consistent performance. The senior coworker, once a constant source of doubt, had begun to recognize the truth she carried in her work. Others had started to appreciate her abilities, seeing that her success was earned, not granted. She walked away from the experience with a stronger sense of confidence, a deeper understanding of her resilience, and the quiet satisfaction of having proven that competence could overcome bias and assumption. The day she had been quietly preparing for arrived, with a mixture of anticipation and pressure that made her heart race. It was the moment she knew could define not only the success of the project, but also how others truly saw her abilities. The presentation to the executives was scheduled, and every detail had to be perfect. She reviewed her slides and notes one last time, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. Her mind was alert, sharp, and focused. But beneath the professionalism, there was a steady undercurrent of nervous excitement. When she entered the conference room, the executives were already seated, their expressions neutral but attentive. The senior coworker, who had spent weeks questioning her competence, was also present, and she could feel the weight of his gaze. For a moment, a flicker of doubt tried to creep in, but she pushed it aside. This was not the time to react emotionally. This was the time to demonstrate clarity, confidence, and skill. She began with a calm, measured introduction, outlining the scope of the project, the challenges they had faced, and the strategies she had employed to overcome them. She spoke clearly, ensuring that every point was grounded in evidence, logic, and careful analysis. Each slide, each explanation, is designed to communicate not just results, but understanding the kind of insight that comes from experience and thoughtful effort. The executives listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. Questions began to surface, probing the assumptions she had made, challenging the conclusions she had drawn. She welcomed these questions, answering each with patience, precision, and depth. When a point required elaboration, she provided examples from the data and explained the reasoning behind every decision. Her answers were concise, yet thorough, leaving no room for doubt that her work was carefully considered and expertly executed. Throughout the presentation, the senior coworker remained silent, his earlier skepticism now replaced with quiet scrutiny. She could see the subtle shift in his demeanor, the surprise, the realization that the project was handled with competence that could not be dismissed. He had assumed that her success was the result of favoritism or external agendas, but here was evidence that contradicted every preconceived notion he held. As the discussion progressed, she noticed the executives' expressions change. Initial curiosity and skepticism gave way to engagement and interest. They asked follow-up questions, exploring the nuances of her approach. She welcomed the opportunity to elaborate, providing insight into the reasoning, the challenges and solutions she had developed. The room, once filled with quiet tension, now focused on the clarity and depth of her work. Her confidence grew with each exchange. She realized that the presentation was not just about defending a project. It was about demonstrating the credibility and professionalism she had built over months of effort. The results spoke for themselves, and the careful preparation she had invested allowed her to answer even the most challenging questions with calm assurance. She could feel a shift not only in the executive's perception, but also in the team members who had been observing her performance after what felt like hours. But was only a portion of the meeting. The executives began to offer feedback. Their comments were positive, acknowledging not only the quality of the work, but also her leadership and problem-solving abilities. They highlighted the clarity of her approach, the innovation in her solutions, and the careful consideration of potential challenges. Their recognition was tangible, and the validation she felt was deeply satisfying. Confirming that her skills and dedication were seen and appreciated, the senior coworker, who had doubted her from the beginning, finally spoke. His tone was cautious, yet respectful. He asked questions about specific strategies she had employed, seeking to understand the logic and thought process behind her decisions. She responded with patience and clarity, providing explanations that were both informative and professional. For the first time, it seemed he was genuinely interested in learning from her, rather than questioning her legitimacy. In the days that followed the presentation, the impact of her work became even more apparent. Projects that had previously been stagnant began moving forward, inspired by the clarity and structure she had demonstrated. Team members who had once been indifferent sought her advice, Recognizing the value of her perspective and the effectiveness of her approach, the senior coworker, while not openly admitting his initial doubts, began to show a degree of respect and consideration that had been absent before. She reflected on the experience, realizing that the moment had been more than just a professional milestone. It was a test of patience, resilience, and character. She had faced skepticism, doubt, and subtle hostility, yet she had remained focused on the work itself. By letting results and competence speak louder than assumptions and biases, she had changed perceptions not through confrontation but through consistency and excellence. The project's success also had a ripple effect on her own confidence and sense of purpose. She recognized that obstacles would always exist, and that doubt from others is a constant challenge in any professional journey. However, she also understood that preparation, careful planning, and unwavering focus could turn these challenges into opportunities. The executive's acknowledgement and the gradual respect from her colleagues reinforced the idea that competence and integrity could prevail even in environments filled with skepticism, in quiet moments. She thought about the senior coworker who had doubted her. She realized that his skepticism had been an unintended catalyst, pushing her to prepare more thoroughly, think more critically, and communicate more effectively. While his assumptions had been unfair, they had inadvertently strengthened her resolve and honed her skills. She chose not to harbor resentment, but to see the experience as a lesson in perseverance, professionalism, and self-belief. The experience also deepened her understanding of leadership. True leadership, she realized, is not always about authority or position. It is about influence, clarity, and the ability to inspire confidence through action. By demonstrating her skills, handling challenges with composure, and maintaining integrity in the face of doubt, she had modeled the qualities that others could respect and emulate by the end of this period. She had established herself as a reliable, capable, and thoughtful professional. The senior coworker's doubts no longer held the power they once had, and other team members began to recognize her contributions more openly. The environment that had once felt intimidating and skeptical was gradually shifting, not because of confrontation or argument, but because consistent, high-quality work cannot remain invisible or unappreciated. She carried forward the lessons of this experience, into every subsequent project and interaction. She remained diligent, focused, and prepared. Understanding that credibility is built over time and that respect is earned through consistency, not claims or assumptions, the experience had been a turning point, teaching her that professional success is not simply about achieving results, but about how those results are delivered, communicated, and perceived. Through it all, she maintained a sense of humility, recognizing that every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Every skeptical glance is a chance to demonstrate resilience, and every doubt cast by others is a test of patience and focus. Her journey continued, strengthened by the knowledge that her abilities, dedication, and character would ultimately define her path, far more than any assumptions, prejudice, or skepticism could. After the successful presentation, a subtle change began to ripple through the office. The project she had led so meticulously had become a benchmark for quality, planning, and execution. Her colleagues, who had once been indifferent or quietly critical, now approached her with questions, seeking guidance and insight. Even the skeptical coworker who had doubted her every move began to exhibit a quiet respect. He no longer interrupted her in meetings or dismissed her suggestions outright. Though the tension between them had not disappeared entirely, there was a shift, however, one that was noticeable and important. In the following weeks, recognition started to manifest in tangible ways. Leadership praised her for the clarity of her work and the innovation she had demonstrated. Her contributions were acknowledged in meetings and reports, and she began to receive invitations to participate in other high-profile projects. These opportunities were not simply a reward, they were a reflection of her abilities, her resilience, and her commitment to excellence. She felt a growing sense of validation, not from the absence of doubt, but from the recognition that consistent effort and competence could no longer be overlooked. Despite these successes, she remained grounded. She understood that respect and credibility are fragile if not nurtured continuously. She continued to prepare thoroughly for every project, to listen carefully to colleagues, and to approach challenges with patience and thoughtfulness. She did not allow praise to inflate her ego, nor did she let the lingering skepticism of a few diminish her self-confidence. She recognized that professional growth is a marathon, not a sprint, and every interaction was an opportunity to reinforce her capabilities. Her relationship with the senior coworker, once defined by tension and doubt, began to transform. He approached her with questions about her strategies, seeking insight that would help him understand the project outcomes better. Though his tone was cautious, it reflected a shift from skepticism to a desire for understanding. She responded with patience and clarity, sharing her knowledge without condescension or resentment. This exchange, though small, marked a turning point in their dynamic. The unspoken tension of months began to ease as professional respect replaced doubt. The experience also brought unexpected lessons about leadership and influence. She observed that real authority does not always come from position or seniority. It comes from the ability to inspire confidence, to communicate effectively, and to navigate challenges with integrity. Her approach encouraged others to trust her judgment, seek her guidance, and collaborate more openly. In many ways, she had become a quiet leader, someone who guided through example rather than assertion, even as she excelled. She remained mindful of the environment around her. She noticed the subtle ways bias and assumption could affect judgment and worked to address them not through confrontation, but through transparency, consistency, and demonstration of skill. She understood that some colleagues might take longer to recognize her abilities, but she accepted that perception changes slowly and that patience is part of professional growth. In addition to the professional validation, there was a personal satisfaction that grew quietly within her. She felt a sense of pride in overcoming obstacles that were never about the project itself, but about the preconceptions of others. The journey had tested her patience, resilience, focus in ways that were difficult to measure, but the rewards, both tangible and intangible, were meaningful. She realized that proving herself was not just about recognition from others. It was about affirming her own capabilities and understanding the value of her efforts. The senior coworker, now observing her more carefully, could no longer dismiss her contributions. He began to see patterns in her work that reflected insight, dedication, and strategic thinking. While he might have once assumed her success was circumstantial, the repeated evidence of her abilities made it impossible for him to maintain that view. She did not gloat or confront him about past skepticism. Instead, she continued to focus on the work itself, allowing her achievements to speak louder than words ever could. Other team members, too, began to recognize her influence. They sought her advice on complex issues, consulted her when making decisions, and valued her input in planning sessions. This change was not immediate, but it was noticeable. The office atmosphere, once tinged with subtle doubt and hesitation, began to shift toward collaboration and mutual respect. Her consistent performance and professional demeanor had set a standard that others aspired to match. Throughout this period, she also reflected on the lessons she had learned about resilience. Facing skepticism, doubt, and occasional subtle hostility had strengthened her ability to focus on long-term goals. She had learned that criticism and doubt, when handled with professionalism, can be transformed into motivation and insight. By concentrating on what she could control, her preparation, her execution, and her response, she had turned potential obstacles into opportunities for growth. She also became aware of the impact her approach had on the culture around her. By demonstrating patience, competence, and humility, she encouraged others to reconsider their assumptions and approach challenges with a similar mindset. Her example quietly challenged biases, showed the value of merit and dedication, and reinforced the idea that success is earned through effort and skill rather than circumstance. In moments of reflection, she acknowledged that the journey was far from over. Challenges would continue to arise, and skepticism might never disappear entirely. Yet she had built a foundation of credibility and respect that would carry her forward. The recognition she received, the shift in colleague attitudes, and the growing opportunities affirmed that she was on the right path. The experience had reinforced her belief that persistence integrity, and excellence are the most reliable tools in navigating professional obstacles. She also learned the subtle power of influence without confrontation. By remaining consistent, professional, and focused on results, she had changed perceptions without engaging in direct conflict. The skeptical coworker, once a source of tension, had become someone who observed, questioned thoughtfully, and slowly acknowledged her capabilities. Others, too, had begun to see her in a new light, appreciating the value she brought to the team and the organization. As the weeks turned into months, she continued to lead projects with the same dedication and attention to detail. Each success built upon the last, reinforcing the credibility she had worked so hard to establish. She understood that respect and recognition are ongoing achievements, not one-time victories, and she remained committed to maintaining the high standards she had set for herself. The journey had taught her patience, perseverance, and the quiet power of consistent excellence, lessons that would guide her for years to come by the end of this period. It was clear that the environment had changed. The subtle doubts and assumptions that had greeted her arrival had been replaced with respect, collaboration, and recognition of her abilities. She had transformed skepticism into admiration, not through confrontation or argument, but through consistent, high-quality work. Her experience had become a model for how professionalism, patience, and competence can overcome bias, challenge assumptions, and create lasting impact in a demanding environment. She carried these lessons with her, understanding that true success is measured not just by achievements, but by the way challenges are handled. Perceptions are changed, and integrity is maintained. The senior coworker's recognition, the respect of her peers, and the acknowledgement from leadership were affirmations of her journey, and a reminder that perseverance, skill, and dedication are the ultimate measures of success. Time passed, and her influence in the office became increasingly evident. The projects she led continued to succeed, and her presence started to shift the culture around her. What had once been an environment of quiet skepticism and subtle doubt transformed gradually into one where colleagues sought her advice, respected her judgment, and recognized her abilities. The senior coworker, once her harshest critic, Nell consulted her thoughtfully, asking for insights that only someone with her skill and experience could provide. The recognition she had earned did not come from confrontation or insistence, but from patience, consistency, and the undeniable quality of her work. Every project she completed, every challenge she overcame, reinforced the truth that her achievements were the result of talent, effort, and perseverance. The office had begun to acknowledge her not because they had to, but because her performance made it impossible to ignore her value. She reflected often on the journey that had brought her here. The skepticism, doubt, and subtle hostility had been painful, but they had also shaped her into a stronger, more resilient professional. She had learned that proving oneself is rarely about convincing doubters through words alone. It is about demonstrating competence, maintaining integrity, and allowing results to speak for themselves. These lessons became the foundation of her approach to leadership and collaboration. Her approach to leadership remained quietly powerful. She did not command attention or demand recognition. Instead, she earned trust through reliability, thoughtful guidance, and clear communication. Her colleagues, inspired by her example, began to follow suit. Teams worked more efficiently, projects ran more smoothly, and a sense of respect and collaboration replaced the tension that had once dominated the office atmosphere. The transformation was subtle but profound. Even the senior coworker, who had once doubted her capabilities, began to acknowledge her expertise openly. He would ask her for feedback on strategies, seek her input on critical decisions, and, on rare occasions, admit that her solutions were more effective than his own. There was no need for confrontation or validation. Her consistent performance and professionalism spoke volumes. This change in him highlighted the power of patience and competence in overcoming prejudice and skepticism. Outside of the office, she carried the lessons she had learned into her personal life. She became more confident in her decisions, more patient in her interactions, and more resilient when facing challenges. The experience had taught her that doubt from others, while sometimes discouraging, does not define her worth. What matters is dedication, preparation, and the integrity with which one approaches every task. The recognition she received also provided opportunities to mentor others. Colleagues who were earlier hesitant or skeptical now sought her guidance on navigating their own challenges. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of patience, professionalism, and consistent effort. Her journey became a source of inspiration for others who faced similar doubts, showing them that success is possible, even in environments filled with bias and assumptions. She continued to focus on her work with the same dedication she had from the beginning. Every project, every interaction, and every challenge was approached with careful thought, preparation, and resilience. She understood that credibility and respect are ongoing achievements, maintained through consistency and integrity. The satisfaction she derived from her work was not only in the acknowledgement of others, but also in the personal affirmation of her abilities and the knowledge that she had overcome obstacles with dignity. Through this journey, she also developed a deeper understanding of human nature and professional dynamics. She realized that doubt and skepticism often stem from insecurity, bias, or lack of understanding. By remaining consistent, professional, and patient, she was able to change perceptions without confrontation. Her success was not only a personal victory, but also a subtle challenge to assumptions and prejudices that had existed in the office for years. The ripple effects of her approach became evident over time. Colleagues who had initially doubted her became supporters, seeking her guidance and respecting her judgment. Teams that were once hesitant to collaborate now worked more openly. Inspired by her example of leadership through competence and integrity, the senior coworker, who had doubted her from the start, now became a professional ally, acknowledging her insights and contributions without reservation. It was a testament to the quiet but undeniable power of perseverance, patience, and excellence. She reflected on the journey from the first day she walked into the office, carrying the weight of doubt and skepticism. The path had been challenging, filled with moments of uncertainty and pressure. But each step had reinforced her resilience and confidence. She had learned that the true measure of success is not merely achieving goals, but in maintaining integrity, inspiring confidence, and navigating challenges with professionalism. Her journey had become a blueprint for overcoming doubt and demonstrating the value of genuine talent and dedication. In the end, the office environment had transformed not through confrontation or argument, but through the consistent demonstration of skill, preparation, and character. She had turned skepticism into recognition, doubt into respect, and assumptions into acknowledgement of her true abilities. The journey had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had affirmed the power of persistence, competence, and quiet leadership as she continued her career. The lessons she learned remained at the forefront of her approach. She understood that challenges, doubt, and bias are part of any professional journey, but they do not define the outcome. What defines success is preparation, integrity, and the consistent demonstration of talent and professionalism. She had faced skepticism, persevered through doubt, and ultimately proven that her achievements were the result of hard work and skill, not circumstance. Her story became more than a personal victory. It was a testament to the power of dedication, resilience, and quiet leadership. It showed that assumptions and prejudice can be overcome through consistent effort, that respect and recognition are earned rather than given, and that integrity and competence ultimately speak louder than doubt and skepticism. She continued to inspire others, quietly yet powerfully, proving that true success is built on talent, perseverance, and the unwavering commitment to do one's best, regardless of the doubts of others.